The Siege of Tobruk lasted for 241 days in 1941, after Axis forces advanced through Cyrenaica from Agheila in Operation Sonnenblume against the British Western Desert Force in Libya. During the Western Desert Campaign of the Second World War, in late 1940, the British had defeated the Italian 10th Army during Operation Compass and trapped the remnants at Beda Fomm. German troops and Italian reinforcements reached Libya, while much of the WDF was sent to Greece and replaced by a skeleton force, short of equipment and supplies. Operation Sonnenblume forced the British into a retreat to the Egyptian border. A garrison was left behind at Tobruk, to deny the port to the Axis, while the WDF reorganized and prepared a counter-offensive. The Axis siege of Tobruk began on 10 April, when the port was attacked by a force under General-Lieutenant Erwin Rommel and continued during 3 relief attempts: Operation Brevity, Operation Battleaxe and Operation Crusader. The occupation of Tobruk deprived the Axis of a supply port closer to the Egypt-Libya border than Benghazi, 900 miles west of the Egyptian frontier, which was within the range of RAF bombers. Tripoli was 1,500 kilometers to the west in Tripolitania. The siege diverted Axis troops from the frontier and the Tobruk garrison repulsed several attacks. The port was frequently bombarded by artillery, dive bombers and medium bombers, as the RAF flew defensive sorties from airfields far away in Egypt. British Mediterranean Fleet and inshore squadron ships ran the blockade, to carry reinforcements and supplies in and wounded and prisoners out. On 27 November, Tobruk was relieved by the 8th Army, during Operation Crusader. Background. Terrain. The Western Desert Campaign was fought primarily in the Western Desert, which was about 240 miles wide, from Masor Matruh in Egypt to Gazala in Cyrenaica on the Libyan coast, along via Balbia, the only paved road. A sand sea 150 miles inland marked the southern limit of the desert, which was at its widest at Diyarbakir and Siwa, in British parlance. Western Desert came to include eastern Cyrenaica in Libya. Extending inland from the coast lies a raised, flat plain of stony desert, about 150 meters above sea level, for 200 to 300 kilometers to the Sand Sea. Scorpions, vipers and flies populated the region, which was inhabited by a small number of nomads. Bedouin tracks linked wells and the easier traverse ground. Navigation was by sun, star, compass and desert sense. Good perception of the environment gained by experience. In spring and summer, days are miserably hot and nights very cold. The Sirocco, a hot desert wind, blows clouds of fine sand, which reduces visibility to a few meters and coats eyes, lungs, machinery, food and equipment. Motor vehicles and aircraft need special oil filters, and the barren ground means that supplies for military operations have to be transported from outside. German engines tended to overheat and tank engine life fell from 1,400–1,600 miles to 300 to 900 miles, made worse by the lack of standard parts for German and Italian types. At Tobruk, the ground was a hard surface which dropped to sea level in steps, with the coast cut by ravines. The Italian defences were a double semicircle of concrete posts, placed for good observation, an anti-tank ditch which was behind barbed wire in places and booby traps. Closer to the port, at the Bardia El Adam Road junction and towards Fort Palestrino, more defended localities had been built. Capture of Tobruk on the morning of 5 January 1941, as soon as the attack on Bardia, defended by the 63rd Infantry Division Cyrene, succeeded. The 7th Armoured Brigade set off for El Adam, and next day began to cut off the port. The 19th Australian Brigade Group reached the eastern defences of Tobruk on 7 January, and the 16th Australian Brigade Group took over on the left. The 4th Armoured Brigade moved to the west part of the perimeter, with the support group blocking the western exits and the 7th Armoured Brigade screening the force from interference from the west. Although little resistance had been met during the moves from Bardia, the Regia Aeronautica had lost many aircraft since Operation Compass began, and the main repair depot at El Adam was captured. That caused the Italians great difficulty in maintaining the serviceability of their aircraft. The attack was to be made against the perimeter east of the El Adam Road, where a battalion of the 16th Australian Brigade was to capture the defences in a night attack, through which the rest of the brigade and the 7th RTR would pass and fan out east and west, then advance towards the harbour. The 17th Australian Brigade and the support group were to stage diversions either side of the attack, and Italian artillery positions were to be located for counter-battery fire. Sandstorms blew up and grounded the RAF for much of the time, but raids were carried out on Tobruk and the Italian bomber bases at Benina and Burqa. On the night of 21 January, several ships and gunboats bombarded the harbour. Destroyers waited further out to attack the Italian cruiser San Giorgio, if the crew tried to escape, and then Wellington bombers flew over Tobruk to drown the sound of the assembly for the attack. The 3rd Australian Battalion attacked at 5:40 am on the 21st of January, covered by artillery, through an area where engineers had disabled booby traps, and then began to lift mines to make paths through the wire and over the anti-tank ditch. After an hour, the 16th Australian Brigade and 18 infantry tanks broke through 1 mile deep on a 1-mile front, against patchy resistance. As the 16th Australian Brigade fanned out at 8:40 am, the 19th Australian Brigade advanced north, behind an artillery barrage and counter-battery fire on the Italian artillery. The 8th Australian Battalion was held up at the Bardia El Adam crossroads by a force of dug-in tanks and machine gun nests, but at 2 p.m., the Australians attacked again and broke through on the right. On the left, the Australians were counter-attacked by 7 tanks and infantry behind an artillery barrage, which was driven off by the Australians, 2 anti-tank guns and 2 infantry tanks. More resistance was met near Palestrino, which held out until 9:30 p.m., and the area around Salero was captured, along with the 22nd Corps and garrison commander, General Pitassi Manella. The 8th Australian Battalion had marched 20 miles since the morning, fighting for 5 miles and lost 100 casualties. During the day, plenums of 55 and 113 squadrons flew 56 sorties against Tobruk and the Gladiators and Hurricanes, a 3-squadron RAF, and 73 and 274 squadrons RAF had patrolled to the west. Half of the Tobruk area had been captured by nightfall, and the Italians began demolitions at the harbour. San Giorgio, having been ordered to stay and help with the defence till the end, fired on the advancing Australian troops until the naval base fell, then was blown up by her crew to avoid capture. A general advance was ordered for the morning, and at dawn, the commander of the Sirte Division, Major General Della Mura, surrendered with several thousand of his troops, and the defence collapsed. The 6th Australian Cavalry Regiment reached the port and took the surrender of Admiral Vietina and the naval garrison. By 3:45 p.m., resistance had ceased and 20,000 prisoners, 208 guns and 87 tanks were taken. Another 18 officers and 750 Italian soldiers had been killed in the fighting, and 30 officers and 2,250 men had been wounded. 13th Corps lost 400 men, 355 of them Australian. Most of the demolitions had been of stores rather than installations, and the inshore squadron began minesweeping, opening the port on the 24th of January.